Hello Zimbabwe and welcome to the Parliamentary and Youth Roundtable. My name is Nadia Mutisi and I will be your host for today. Today I am at the Say What studio of choice, that is your favorite studio that advances the rights of young people to be able to access public health services. But most importantly, for today, we're trying to create a society here in Zimbabwe that ensures that it is gender-based violence free. Joining me today at the Say What studio of choice are some dignitaries, that is some very important people, some VIPs, that is our parliamentarians. But also joining me is the present and the future of Zimbabwe, young people from Zimbabwe's higher learning institutions. Thank you so much for joining us, our members of parliament.
Thank you.
And young people, we are so happy that you guys are here and that you actually actively want to engage. There's always a problem where people think that young people are apathetic towards what's happening in our society. But today is proof that we're not apathetic, but that we actually do want to engage. The topic of discussion today, or the topic on the round table, is essentially the report that was released by the Joint Parliamentary Portfolio Committees on Higher and Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development, as well as the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, what a mouthful, on Women Affairs, Community and Small to Medium Enterprise Development. So there was a recent report that was issued on sexual harassment in our different higher learning institutions, and that's what we're here to discuss today. Before we move on, we'd like to give our members of parliament, our honorable dignitaries, to introduce themselves to us today.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Mavunga. I'm a member of parliament for Chitungwiza South constituency. I sit in the Portfolio Committee for Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. I also sit in the Parliamentary Legal Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself to us, Honorable Mavunga. We'll move on to you, ma'am.
Good morning, viewers. Good morning, listeners. My name is Joanna Mamombe. I'm a member of Parliament representing Harare West constituency. I'm also a member of the Higher Tertiary Education Committee in Parliament, as well as the Lands Committee, which is not a subject for today, but those are the two committees that I sit on in Parliament. And also I'm the Vice Chairperson of the recently launched caucus, the Youth Parliamentary Caucus. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you very much, Honorable Joanna Mamombe. And our last Member of Parliament, please could you kindly introduce yourself?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, viewers. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Tatenda Anastasia Mavetera. I'm a Member of Parliament representing Sekech Komba constituency, of course under the PR, and I sit in the Portfolio Committee of Youth and also in the Budget Committee, and I am the Chairperson of the Parliamentary Youth Caucus. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Honorable Tatenda Mavetera, for gracing us with your presence today. So we're going to get into the first segment of our show today, and that is we're going to give our honorable MPs the chance to just introduce us to what exactly they're working on, so we know who they are now. But we'll start with Honorable Tatenda Mavetera, and would like you to just cover it briefly in 5 minutes on sexual harassment as a subject, and how this affects the fundamental and absolute right of the girl child in Zimbabwe to the right to dignity.
Okay, thank you very much. I think what we need to first of all start with is for us to look on the girl child, especially the wholesome girl child. We realized that because of our patriarchal differences and also patriarchal backgrounds that we have, you realize that we have always seen that the girl child has been victimized and also it has been looked down upon. But we are happy that with such background, the young woman or the girl child is also tried to live beyond any expectations, and they've tried by all means to make sure at least that they endure what is there. I know there's always been a talk which has always been there, whereby men say, how come we always have affirmative programs which are censored to women? It's because when we were growing up, we knew that the girl child, even when it comes to going to school, you'd realize that if ever there is little money in the home, you realize that the father would say, let the men go to school, and the girl child would not be able to do that. So because of that, since we're being looked down upon, we realized it was quite important for us to just make sure that we're visible, and whenever we get an opportunity, we utilize it to the best. That's why you can see now, even I can tell you, even in Parliament, you realize maybe when it comes to the young women in Parliament, the ones that are 35 years and below, it's only me and Honorable Joanna Mamombe. And when you look at the males, I'm sure they're about 5. So that alone shows that when it comes to even all these political decisions, you realize that men actually dominate more than what women do. And truly speaking, because of that, we need then to be able to surpass that. But when you look at sexual harassment, indeed, it is most skewed to the young woman and the girl child. And even if you look at this report, let me thank the Portfolio Committee of Higher Tertiary Education, of course, in brief. You realize that they went on and had to initiate this. I remember the first time we had this discussion in Parliament, it was through Honorable Mamombe. She brought it up in the House, and then she said, you need to look at the children or the girl child who is at universities. You realize that they're being victimized, they're being sexually harassed. And now we look at it that we just have principles when it comes to the sexual harassment bill, but we don't have any conclusive law which safeguards the girl child when it comes to sexual harassment. I think Honorable Mafunga is going to speak about that, but I'm saying to myself, if you look at it, we're having a challenge whereby it's only a matter of us having this sexual harassment law being there, but it's just not something which is quite specific to that young woman. It is something which is going to be looking at someone who is supposed to be employed. And looking at that, I think that is actually a disservice for us. And looking at sexual harassment with a girl child, I'll go on and say that whenever one is sexually harassed, they lose confidence. When it comes to them going to school, they won't be able to even concentrate as expected. They even tend or not even attend lessons because the girl child is being sexually harassed. When it comes to psychological trauma, one goes through depression because you're being sexually harassed. And for us as legislators, especially us as female legislators, we need to take the bull by its horns and say, there we have a bill which is supposed to be coming through, the sexual harassment one. What is it going to say about protecting the girl child? What is it that is going to be saying about protecting that child who is going to school? Look, we are in quite economic challenges that we face as a country. Of course, when I come from where I come from, I would say due to the sanctions that are surrounding us. But when you look at it, you realize that a lot of people would be, not a lot, but some people would be in poverty and they can't even afford. And because of that, they are bound to be sexually harassed. And then you realize as well that one is sexually harassed because at the end of the day, it's also about you looking at what you would have done there. I know a lot of people will go on and say maybe it's because of the way that you bring about yourself. I think that was what was in the report. But for me, I'm saying, why is it the male are harassing women? We are all equal, according to Section 8 of the Constitution. We are all equal, be it a man, be it a woman. So at the end of the day, there's never a time one should victimize the other. If you're at a better off position than the other, why do you need to be victimizing me? And I think sexual harassment should be treated with the worst that you can, with all the rights that you can also actually be able to think of. I thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that, Honorable Tatenda Mavetera. And I absolutely love that in your presentation you're speaking with us not only about gender equality but also quality education and how quality education is affecting the poverty rates within our different communities. And so when we're looking at sexual harassment, we're not just looking at gender equality but also how are girls then able to access education within their different communities. And when you're not able to adequately access education, what does that mean for your future? And I thank you so much for bringing that up and also showing us that Parliament actually has the rights of young people and young women at heart. I mean, we're talking about key populations that are not really looked at. These are also persons with disabilities. So we absolutely adore and we love the fact that we're actually being taken care of and our voices are being heard within Parliament. I'll move on to Honorable Joanna Mamombe and would love if you would be able to address on the work of the Higher and Tertiary Education Portfolio Committee and the sexual harassment cases at colleges and universities, maybe your take on what exactly is happening. And we love that Honorable Tatenda Mavetera was able to say that the idea or the pursuit of this particular initiative emanated from you. Maybe you could also take us through what was that like and why you had to then say, let's look at this. What was the background?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Nadia. So I'll just give a brief background about myself and how I actually got interested into investing my work in Parliament on sexual harassment in terms of girls in tertiary institutions. So I am a former student leader with the Zimbabwe National Students Union from Chino University. So I was the National Agenda Secretary in ZNASU, and that was between 2013 and 2015. So during that time, when I was serving in ZNASU, I faced a lot of challenges, especially in terms of mobilizing the female students to stand up and speak, on behalf of themselves, to be able, to show their agency and also contribute to governance issues in this country. So one of the fundamental issues that were affecting female students included issues to do with sexual harassment. So then I was also working with different organizations, including Say What, Female Students Network, just to mention a few. So by the time that I graduated from university, I then told myself, okay, I needed to join the mainstream politics so that I could go into Parliament and push issues that I was pushing then as a student leader. So in 2018, I then took it upon myself to say, you know what, I can do it. I've been speaking on behalf of other students, on behalf of the female students in tertiary institutions. Let me go into Parliament and make sure that I advance and advocate for this kind of policies. So it's actually something that drove me to then move a motion in Parliament to say, as a former student leader, this is my background. These were the issues that I was facing every day of my life. Female students being harassed in tertiary institutions by their male counterparts and also by staff, by lecturers, just to mention a few. So when I got into Parliament in 2018, I was so passionate about speaking on issues to do with education, particularly in higher and tertiary institutions. So when I speak about higher and tertiary education or institutions, I'm talking about the polytechnics, I'm speaking about the teachers' colleges, I am speaking about the universities. So because I also had an experience of leading students in those institutions. So when I got into Parliament, I then realized, you know what, I needed to move a motion to say we need to do something. So I then raised as a question to the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, then Professor Murwira, to say what are you doing in terms of the sexual harassment issues that are happening in tertiary institutions. So that's when the Speaker ordered the Minister to come with a ministerial statement to then present issues to do with the sexual harassment in universities. But also I'll take you briefly on the procedures of Parliament, because it's something that you need to understand as we tackle these issues. So Parliament, we have obviously the three roles that we do: the legislative role, the representative role, and the oversight role. So our oversight is to make sure that the minister or the executive, which is the president, vice president, and ministers, they implement what we legislate, meaning our policies and our, and our laws. And also us as a Parliament, we are the custodian of the Constitution. We also formulate laws and, in the House. So I then needed to make sure that the minister would come to the House and present probably a bill, because usually the process of a bill formulation comes or is initiated by the minister. Of course, there are instances whereby a member of Parliament can bring what is called a private member's bill, you see, but that can, take a lot of time. It has its own procedures. But the easiest is for a minister to propose a bill, then they bring it to Parliament for debate and so forth. So this is what I expected the minister to do. But instead, he then did probably what he thought was best. He brought in a ministerial statement, read it in Parliament, and we had a chance to debate. But of course, I just thought it wasn't enough, because we wanted something concrete, something tangible in Parliament to do with issues of sexual harassment, not in the workplace, not anything else, but in tertiary institutions, because it's quite peculiar because of the environment that the university student is existing in. So Moving on to that, we had proposals of other MPs, coming into debate. Then the Women's Affairs Minister then said she was going to bring a sexual harassment bill, which is actually now on the table. But still, I still feel that a universal sexual harassment bill, it's not enough, because we are talking about sexual harassment in tertiary institutions. So I then had to still emphasize and to stick to say, we need a policy, we need an act, we need a bill that speaks about students, female students in universities, male students probably are also facing harassment, because it's not also only the female student who is facing sexual harassment, even the male counterparts, they're also facing the same. So we then went on, because I have an advantage that I sit on the portfolio committee of Higher Tertiary Education Committee. We then took it upon ourselves to say, okay, let's have a fact-finding visit. Let's get to the students. Let's visit the institutions and see and learn from them, and also hear what is it that they want. Because at the end of the day, the policies that we make in Parliament, they should be informed by the constituents that we are representing. So in this scenario, it was the students in tertiary institutions. So I remember the end of last year, we then took it upon ourselves through our chairperson of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee on Higher Tertiary Education, Honorable Lindiwe Maposa, to say let's visit the tertiary institutions and hear from them the challenges that they're facing and all the types of sexual harassment that they're facing, so that when it comes to also the policy, we then speak to what the students will be telling us. So we then had fact-finding visits. We picked different polytechnics, teachers' colleges, as well as universities. So what we then did is we then said, okay, as Higher Tertiary Education Committee, we also don't exist in isolation. We needed the Women's Affairs Committee so that they can also see the challenges that the girl child is facing in the universities. So we then invited the chairperson of the Women's Affairs to then come on board. So it was a joint visit that we then did. So it was the Women's Affairs and the Higher Tertiary Education Committee. We went on the fact-finding mission. We visited different tertiary institutions, and then this is the report that was then presented by our chairperson. I'm sure the report is in public. It's in Hansard. We are also going to talk about the reports and the findings. So basically, this is the process that we have gone through. So we'll also talk about what is our proposal as a committee in terms of this, and also their proposals of the bill, that will contribute to the bill of sexual harassment. So it's through the fact-finding visits that we did under the Higher Tertiary Education Committee. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable Joanna Mamombe, for such a detailed presentation and making us understand what exactly was happening. But what I absolutely love about your presentation is how you speak about your experience as a student leader, where you were learning, and how you've taken that up and gotten into Parliament, and you're speaking about these particular issues. But that also highlights the need for having more young people within Parliament, so that we're able to address these particular issues immediately when they are arising within where we're learning and the institutions where we're finding ourselves. From the information that we've gathered, we understand that about 2% of youth worldwide are the ones that hold decision-making power in the different countries all across the world. And these youth make up the majority of the populations in the different countries. So there's a thing that we need to be able to discuss there about getting youth to get into positions of decision-making, so that we're able to actually have these particular talks. That's why we're here today, and that's why most of the youth that are here, all of us, have actually gone through the report. To finish off, we're going to hear from Honorable Mavunga, who's simply going to talk to us about the legal gaps and the role of Parliament in addressing the sexual harassment at higher learning institutions and parliamentary procedures after tabling the report.
Thank you very much, Nadia. From what Honorable Mamombe has been saying, she has covered actually part of the process that goes through in Parliament. But I, coming from the Justice Committee, perhaps I'm only going to touch on the legal aspects of how then we should proceed. But perhaps before I do that, I had a little research on the issue of sexual harassment, especially as it relates to our law here in Zimbabwe. What I picked is that sexual harassment is not a crime. But part of it, of course, it is actually covered under your rape, your indecent assault. But the other forms of sexual harassment, they don't constitute crimes. So to that extent, we already have a problem. because the sexual harassment, according to my view, should actually be a crime in Zimbabwe. So whatever law that we are going to create should actually criminalize this sexual harassment. In other words, I'm saying that whatever bill we are going to come up with should have a clause which will actually make it a criminal offense. Our Criminal Law Codification and Reform Act does not touch on that. It only touches on indecent assault and your rape. So there is a lacuna there. We need to attend to that first. And then secondly, I also picked that even in cases where one person has tried to enforce the rights, where there's been sexual harassment, our courts have treated such cases very lightly. I think it's because of the patriarchal society that we have. We do not have sufficient authorities in Zimbabwe which actually deal with cases of sexual harassment. In other words, these cases go unreported, or if they are reported, eventually they die natural death. I actually picked just one case in Zimbabwe where a certain lady, that is in 2021, was actually awarded the 500,000 damages by the labor court. And she had to do this case alone. All lawyers, because she was actually suing Confederation of Zimbabwe Industries. So, you know, these conglomerates, these big companies, they actually have good lawyers. So apparently all lawyers abandoned her, and she had to pursue the case on her own. And she succeeded, and she was actually awarded. Apparently the perpetrator's house had to be sold, the vehicle had to be sold to cover for the damages. So my point is, we don't have enough authority in Zimbabwe. Lawyers, for example, we would shun such cases. Why? Because we believe that our prospects of success are very, very limited. So my point is simply that even in delict or in civil law, we have very little that is covered in our jurisdiction. Then I move on to the aspect that you're talking about. What processes does the parliament then do? You have tabled your report before parliament. The report has been tabled by the chairperson of the committee. What is going on now is that there is going to be debate amongst members of parliament. So I think at this point you can even lobby if you know some of the members of parliament from your communities or from your constituents, like Honorable Mamet and the Honorable Mombe. They then debate these issues in parliament, debate in support or against the report. And also if there are areas which you think that the outreach program did not cover, you presented them to the honorable members so that they address those issues in parliament. That is what is now expected. The debate, I understand, is now still on the table. It is ongoing. So we expect that there's going to be more debate and perhaps more research. What I would actually think is that you are the people who are being affected. You equip your legislators with information, with research, so that when they present it, you can even go to other jurisdictions. Do some case studies. What is the position in South Africa? What is the position in Zambia or other countries? So that you can actually indicate to honorable members that in this country the position is this. And we think if you go to Kenya, we have the best system in Kenya. Why don't we implement the system in Kenya in our jurisdiction? Our legislators, at times, they are very busy. They may not have that time to do those research. But if you do the research, you support them. Then after the debate, the report may be adopted and you make recommendations. This is why Honorable Momombo was saying that if we recommend that the responsible minister must come up with a bill, which I believe has now been done, should come up with a bill which should be presented to parliament. Before it is debated in parliament, the same committee again will now take that bill to the colleges in this instance. So you will have a second bite of the cherry in that if the bill is then presented by the minister, it will go back to the colleges where they will conduct public hearings. In those public hearings, again, you are supposed to be contributing the weaknesses, the strengths, or any additions to the bill as it is coming from the executive. After the debate, there is going to be another report which is going to be presented in parliament as regards the bill. If there are amendments, additions and subtractions, they will then be presented. Once the bill has been presented at that stage, then it will then go for a second reading, where again legislators will also contribute. So we have so many chances, so to speak, so many platforms where you can actually make your input. After the second reading, it will then go to the third reading, and if it is passed, then it goes to the Senate, where the same process, of course, they will not, when the public hearings are conducted, it will like be a joint committee between the committee from the lower house and the thematic committee from the Senate. So when it goes to the Senate, the same process, they debate on it and they pass the bill. So these are the steps that are going to be followed in the event that a bill has come up. And I think the most critical thing that I've picked is that you want something which is tangible in terms of results. Otherwise, we'll still have these talk shows. So the next thing, I think after the debate, there must be this zeal that we have a bill before Parliament. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Honorable Mavunga, for making us understand the processes that are involved and also for pointing out the legal gaps that are existing. I'm sure our youth, our young people, our students are burning with questions because we had the opportunity to go through the report and a lot of us have the recommendations. In fact, before you came, there was a loud, heated argument today. So I'm quite sure that we'll be here maybe for the next 24 hours we'll be arguing and discussing with you. I hope you came prepared for what the youth have to ask and to present before you. So I'm just going to hand over to the young people. If you have any questions to ask our honorable members of parliament, then please, this is the particular platform to be able to do so. I can start with you, Mr. Sagwanda.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you, members of parliament. Without knowing that do we have the same privileges that you have in parliament for us to speak freely. But firstly, I would want to thank you for the work that you actually did to actually go the extra mile in trying to protect us, to protect the future generation, and to protect the majority, which are young people in Zimbabwe. I would want to start by pointing to the legal gaps that Honorable Mavunga was actually presenting on. What starts, Honorable? Do we start by having, or Honorable Mavunga, I think should be the best one to answer the question. What starts? Is it proper for us to start with an institutional policy, which covers universities and all tertiary institutions? Or we start with a mother policy, which is the national policy, which deals with sexual harassment, and which keeps, because if we look at students and we forget, the mothers, the children who are still at home, wouldn't have done, a great job. But if we were to look at the contribution that we can make towards the national policy, then, we cascade to the subsidiary institutions, which are the tertiary institutions, having them to tally with the national policy, then I think definitely from there we'll have something tangible. I don't know what's your take on that. Maybe I am a bit fast in my contribution, but I think maybe something like that would help us. Yeah. Then secondly, Honorable Mavunga, I want to say it's not a lacuna that we have in law, that everything that is sexually related is not criminalized. The reason why they maintain most of these matters civil, we do not want to create a tyrant, maybe not on top of another tyrant, but I think so I think it's a demarcation that we have, and it's a necessary demarcation that we must maintain. Though the need that we need to address is to tackle down these issues. Like you said, we have had discussions, we have had round tables, we have had, research being written on the same subjects. And I think this is my fifth within this month to be discussing about sexual harassment. So I think we should stick on the contribution of what we're going to write down for us to have, that policy, be it whether at the tertiary level or at the national level. I think we need to tackle down everything.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, what I like about Parliament is that amongst the roles that we have the representative role. So even when I speak in Parliament, I'm not speaking as Joanna Mamombe. Of course, I can say my views, but at the end, I have a constituency that I am representing. Of course, I have Harare West, but I also have the young people who are also looking up to me in terms of my contributions in Parliament. So if you listened to what I said, the processes that then prompted these visits to the tertiary institutions is because we didn't have a specific sexual harassment policy or any law that governs all the universities. But if you look at a workplace, for example, they have a Labor Act. And in the Labor Act, it speaks about sexual harassment. And those are the females, the mothers, the sisters that you're talking about who are in an employment, like a formal employment setup. But leaving also a very important, sector of the female student in tertiary university. So this is why we then thought, maybe, yes, the sexual harassment policy, we need it at a national level. Then it cascades down to different, sectors, for example, the tertiary institutions. So right now, as I speak, there is a bill of sexual harassment that has been brought in by the Minister of Women Affairs. But personally, and with the interactions and with the engagements that I've also been doing, I hear you've had like 5 discussions in this week. This is like my everyday thing. I interact with different female students from different universities raising these issues. So for me, these are very pertinent to me. These are, very close to my heart. So I still feel like, yes, as we are doing the national sexual harassment policy, let's also focus on the sexual harassment policies in universities. And when I mean in tertiary institutions, and this has also to be, uniform. You see, when you go to polytechnic, when you go to teachers college, when you go to university, the policy has to be the same. And we'll also play our role as advocates, going there to the universities, popularizing, tertiary institutions, popularizing the policy. But I still believe that, yes, there is a bill in Parliament, but we need a specific bill. But it's good that we have to interact, because this is your constituency. You're the ones who are facing these things in each and every day. So it's up to you to then contribute, because the good thing about the bill, when it's on table like this, you can even write to Parliament to say, I am so and so, I think I want to contribute to the bill, and this is, my contribution. So you're also welcome to even contribute to the bill by writing to Parliament or writing to the legislators, like what Honorable Mavunga was highlighting, to say you can then pick an honorable member that you feel like, okay, she can go and represent me. But most importantly, you can write your own submissions and present them to the Clerk of Parliament. But I still feel that we need a policy that is specific to the tertiary institutions. This is me here. But the ball is in our courts, all of us, to say what is really important. Thank you.
Thank you very much for asking that pertinent question, or that contribution rather. I want first to try and add to what Honorable Mamombe has just said. Perhaps you are right, because what I think we should be doing is to have a national policy, which is a bill. And that bill goes through as a national policy. Mm-hmm. Once the bill has gone through, it becomes an act of Parliament, which is administered by a particular minister. Mm-hmm. Within that bill, we empower the minister to make regulations which regulate particular industries. So in a way, I'm saying the bill will be a national document. It's a national policy. But any other, in that document, you then empower the minister to make regulations. In this case now, he is now dealing with the specific institutions. Because you may now talk of your universities, your vocational training centers and things like that. You can have a statutory instrument for sexual harassment in universities, statutory instrument for sexual harassment in vocational training, something like that. So I think you are quite correct that perhaps we have a national document, but that document must then empower the relevant minister to then subsequently interact with you and make laws which are, like Honorable Mamombe is saying, are peculiar to your situation. And then going by the issue that he said there is no lacuna. You know, if you are going to tell this lady who won the case at the Supreme Court that she was sexually harassed, at one time the the perpetrator would send some pornographic material. In some instances, you would pass some innuendos like of sexual nature, things like that. If you are going to tell her that you can't report your case to the police, she will tell you that the law is a problem. So that's the lacuna I'm referring to. Because once someone who feels aggrieved that I can't go to a police station, the only remedy that I have is to go to a civil court. In most cases in our society, like in Zimbabwe, most of the issues that arise, someone wants to go to a police station. Even a tenant who has failed to pay rent, the landlord wants to go to a police station. So I think we should have an area, like in this area where they are aggrieved, can have an option either to pursue the matter criminally or to have it in the civil court. Otherwise, the easiest remedy available to a victim of sexual violence is the nearest police station. With the courts, you know how they are operating. So really, to that person, there's a lacuna. The law must actually make this criminal. Why is this man harassing me? Things like that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. I just add on to that. I think that is a very, very pertinent question. We have had laws, especially even in the finance side of things, especially in the country, whereby we'll be having a finance bill, and of course it becomes a finance act when we approve it as parliament. You realize that from it, then we then derive certain laws that are then supposed to be adhered to. But then if you look at it, if one is then in isolation, it becomes a problem. You won't be able to implement. But then if we're going to be having a law that resides in the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, it's very much implementable rather than from it coming from another ministry. Because if you look at it going forward, especially when we look at it in Parliament, we have realized that whenever a minister is accountable to a certain bill, they implement faster and better. Rather than it being residing in another ministry, it becomes a problem. So for me, I think what we need to do going forward is for us to look at the umbrella or the main act, which will be the Sexual Harassment Act, which then everyone has to adhere to. But in fact, we then need to make sure that we've got a specific one which goes to the Minister of Higher and Tertiary Education, so that it relates to you as students. Because if we're going to be having that wholesome one, to be honest with you, yes, I know when it comes to law is supposed to be adhered by everyone, but we're talking of experience of what we've seen happening. And I think it's quite important for us to be having one which is specific, and then at least in that way it can then be enforceable. I thank you.
Thank you very much, our honorables, for being able to address the pragmatics of this particular act. And I love that we're also discussing how implementable something is, because sometimes we put in a law and it just hangs in the air and no one ever does anything about it. So thank you so much also for the question. I'd like to hear from Ms. Anna Sande.
Thank you very much, Nadia. First of all, I would like to appreciate our honorable members of parliament for the work that they have been doing, especially trying to look into the issue of sexual harassment. We really, really appreciate the efforts so far. But I would like to express my concern. I understand that you have recommended that there should be a bill, but I'm worried about the timing. I know that it's a process and it's going to take a lot of time. In the meantime, as we are speaking right now, as per the recommendations or the reports that you have brought to us right now, it shows that sexual harassment is now very rampant in tertiary institutions. So that means that as we are gathered here right now, someone is being sexually harassed in some way. It's just that we do not have the reports. So in the meantime, while we wait for the sexual harassment bill, what is it that we should do immediately just to curb this pandemic that have visited us within our tertiary institutions? I would have loved and I would have appreciated if we could have declared this a state of national emergency, because a lot of things are happening. We are losing lives. Most of the girls are becoming victims of sexual harassment, and there are a lot of consequences that comes through. People are losing their lives, some are committing suicide, some are just dying alone, because from the report it actually shows that most of these cases are going unreported. Mm-hmm. So that means there is an emergency, there is need for a quick action to curb sexual harassment. And I would also want to recommend that in as much as we're going to have a universal sexual harassment bill that's going to protect everyone. We also would like to demand that we have a universal sexual harassment policy in tertiary institutions, because I would like to appreciate that as much as the report that was brought forward, it shows that not all tertiary institutions have got an independent sexual harassment policy. So that means that some are lagging behind, and those who have that independent sexual harassment policy, how are they implementing it? So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. I think in terms of time, we're sort of running out of time, so I'd really love if the youth who have questions would be able to just voice their opinions and questions, and then our honorable members can then respond to these particular questions at the end. So we can go to you.
Thank you so much. Firstly, I would also want to appreciate that you guys did the research, because it's also important that we work with facts, not assumptions. So my first question, I'll direct it to Honorable Maletela. We've read the report, we've gone through the report, and we talk mainly about the girl child. But in the press, we have had a lot of stories covered about young boys being sexually harassed by other men, and that section is not talked about. Even in the Constitution, we don't have anything that mainly focuses on that. So my question to you is, does government have anything, or do we have anything that is coming up to make sure that we protect young boys as well, because they are being perpetrated by other men? Then my second question is that as I was reading the report, we saw that sexual harassment is also attributed to high levels of poverty, and we all agree to that. That some ladies now end up dating blessers, or they've been called non-bachelor academics, non-academic bachelors in the report, because of poverty. So I'm asking, do we have some sort of a social safety net for these ladies, so that when they go low, at least they have a net, they have somewhere to start, so that they don't fall prey to this. Then we also have young ladies, we're a good team, now when they go on their menstrual cycle, they cannot afford sanitary pads. Maybe they might spill themselves, and this might lead them to get harassed. So I think if we have a social safety net, it also protects them from such. Then my last recommendation would be that, yes, we might want to have a universal policy in all tertiary institutions. We might want to have committees in tertiary institutions that look into sexual harassment issues. But I think, and I would advise that we have third parties in institutions that look at sexual harassment issues, so that when a sexual harassment issue comes in, it's not taken straight to the courts, but we have a committee, or we have a third party that looks at these issues before they are passed to the court, and they look at the levels of the cases. If it's a case, if it's a level 1, maybe it was just a nasty comment, it goes through the committee. But if it was a rape or something, it then goes straight to the court. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful recommendation. We can hear from Ms. Peter. Then we can hear from you, Rainbow, afterwards.
Thank you very much. I just really want to express concern, firstly, on the fact that we're hearing from our Honorable Member of Parliament that sexual harassment in Zimbabwe is not labeled as a crime. So then that means that at the moment, up until a bill is passed, or up until an act of parliament becomes successful, there is a vacuum in the legal system whereby perpetrators can continue to harass our fellow students, and whilst they are still able to get away with it, which is very sad. I would also want to pinpoint the fact that we also didn't see much mention on the protection of the victims. We have had situations in our tertiary institutions whereby after students report, they are actually harassed by lecturers, they are marked down, they face a lot of difficulty because there is not a lot of protection that goes towards them. Sometimes even the names of the people who they have reported, they leak. So that also means that we also need certain laws or certain measures or restrictions that could be charged against these people who release such information that's supposed to be shared in confidence. Then again, I don't see anywhere in the report whereby they're putting a measure against, take for example, we have a lecturer who's being accused of sexual harassment, whereby now they're supposed to be subdued in a way, they're not allowed to keep on attending to their duties. At the same time, they're also not supposed to be allowed to resign. We had a situation at University of Technology in 2019, whereby a lecturer was accused of sexual harassment with a lot of evidence. We had voice notes, we had pictures, we had charts, we also had testimonials in writing. We had a lot of evidence. But then just before the disciplinary hearing, the lecturer was allowed to resign. So then you realize that with a situation like this, we are going to have these cases going on, and then because the lecturers are not suspended pending the investigations, they get away with it. So now the lecturer is now at another institution and is still doing his acts, he's still harassing students because there's this advantage. Now moving on, I would also want to mention on the issue of misrepresentation of the male students. May we have measures put in place for male students, because we would find that male students are being harassed whereby lecturers are asking them to ask girls out on their behalf. So now then they are also affected. We also don't see mention of such acts such as sodomy being mentioned. These affect our male students. They also need to be mentioned, because I understand that the sexual harassment policy is then now a policy that is uniform to that particular environment, particularly in the situation, the institution. So these situations also need to be mentioned and addressed. Then lastly, I also really did note the issue of dressing being highlighted in the report coming from our honorable members of parliament, whereby they were saying that from their reports that they collected from the institutions, one of them was reiterating that is the female students dressing that is then sexually harassing to the lecturers, or maybe there's supposed to be a way or measures on what kind of dressing that is supposed to be maintained at university level. But when it comes to this, it is quite problematic, because we need to understand that currently in Zimbabwean institutions, we are also incorporating students from different cultures, from different countries. So there is room for multicultural, there is room for diversity. There should also be room for respect for adulthood. So then I feel that this is just now an advantage that is being taken by the lecturers, whereby they say that I couldn't control myself because the student was dressed in such a way. The lecturer is supposed to just come to a lecture to teach the students and to disperse his duties. Full stop. The lecturers are not even supposed to be allowed to ask for pictures from the students. They're not even allowed to comment on students dressing, because at the end of the day, we are going to have problems whereby we now begin to judge people based on their religion, based on their belief, based on their background. And it becomes really problematic. I hope something comes in to really address that. And then lastly, we also really hope that as we amend this bill, or towards attainment of the act, we also look into amending other acts that really affect sexual harassment, such as the Cyberbullying Act or the Cyber Act, whereby we're saying time immemorial, our disciplinary committees would request us to have evidence, because if we would just report by word of mouth or in ink, then they wouldn't take it. They'll probably say that you are framing the perpetrator. So we would resort to recording audios, to taking pictures, to recording videos from a distance. But now these are things that are now being discouraged in the recent Cyber Act. So we would now need resolves or resolutions that come into compromise to such an extent that in the event that we need evidence, we need tangible evidence that such and such a thing happened, then the Cyber Act has to allow the students to surpass such measures. I thank you.
Thank you very much for such a detailed presentation. We can then hear from Rainbow as she addresses her question. Also, please let's try to make our questions or our remarks quite short so that each person gets a chance to have their question addressed by our honorable members of parliament.
Okay, thank you, Nadia. We really want to appreciate the work that you're doing. We have seen the report, and I would like to acknowledge that the report is very rich in terms of the causes of sexual harassment in higher and tertiary institutions and the prevalence of the cases. However, I feel that the report kind of lacks in terms of the recommendations that you would proffer to ensure that we reduce the prevalence of sexual harassment in higher tertiary institutions. So the only recommendation that I noted from the report was the issue of criminalizing the act of sexual harassment, as has been alluded to by Honorable here. But we also run a risk of creating more crimes without strong instruments to implement and ensure that those crimes are enforced. And as we all know, in law, it is very easy to prove a case in civil law than it is to prove a case in criminal law. Because in criminal law, you don't have to prove your case beyond a reasonable doubt, and it is very difficult. So we still need those measures in civil law to ensure that it is dealt with. So as Parliament, as our representatives, what then are you going to do to ensure that enforcement of that crime, or enforcement of the crime that would have been created by the Act, is going to be very effective? That's one. And then two, we also want to recommend that in terms of institutions, we have disciplinary committees that deal with such issues. For example, at the University of Zimbabwe, we have a disciplinary committee for staff members, and we also have a disciplinary committee for students. So it is my suggestion that we have independent disciplinary committees who are going to be dealing with issues of sexual harassment, especially that are sexual harassment being perpetrated by lecturers on their students. This will help us to ensure that if we have an independent board dealing with that, we won't have issues whereby lecturers are generally abusing students and harassing students, knowing that, well, my friend sits on the disciplinary board, so I'm not going to be, I'm going to be exonerated from my actions. So yeah, that will. Oh, and also lastly, I also appreciate that Honorable Mavetele sits on the budget committee. Now, I also want to highlight that we have also noted that the other reason why we have high prevalence of sexual harassment in tertiary institutions relates to poverty and economic hardships that we're facing. Now, what has the Committee on the Budget and the Committee on Higher Tertiary Education, what have they done to engage the Ministry of Finance to ensure that services in higher and tertiary education institutions are subsidized, to ensure that students not fall prey to economic hardship that would then lead them to find themselves in such predicaments, I think.
Yeah. All very important questions. Thank you so much, students, young people, for raising these particular questions. We'll hear from Tadiwa.
Good day. I would like to appreciate the efforts that has been put by the government and the Parliament in trying to put an end to sexual harassment. But after looking at the document that we have, I feel like we are generalizing what sexual harassment is. There are various ways in which sexual harassment can take place. Yes, we can come and talk about how the lecturer can be harassing a student, but what about other scenarios in which sexual harassment can take place? So at the end of the day, if we generalize the topic to that, we'll see that we're only going to end sexual harassment between the students and the teacher. But there's sexual harassment in relationships as students in these institutions, the landlord who's responsible for the place that I'm renting it. We have scenarios whereby in an institution, some of us actually married. I'm studying and I'm in a marriage, I'm going home, my husband feels I need to entertain his sexual needs, and if I say no, he doesn't care because he feels he's entitled to me as an individual. So I feel like there is need to put more effort into looking at how we can curb sexual harassment in institutions, because there are a lot of ways in which this is happening. So I'd like to question how the Parliament has been putting such factors into consideration, and why you're also generalizing the topic to the students and the lecturer as well. And also, I would also like to ask if we have a specific definition of what sexual harassment is, because I feel most of us don't actually know that when we go through such scenarios, this is sexual harassment. That's why at the end of the day, we don't report. So is the government giving an actual definition of what sexual harassment is? Thank you.
Okay, we'll take the very last question because we are short of time at this point.
Okay, thank you. I would like to talk about sexual harassment as a whole, because we see that people, they are not being educated what is sexual harassment, and there are no awareness campaigns about sexual harassment I was reading this report and I saw that even in other universities like University of Zimbabwe, they don't even know, and there's no police which can govern that. So at the end of the day, I see that people, they don't know what sexual harassment. People are being harassed every day and they don't know what sexual harassment is. So at the end of the day, we see that harassment, maybe this report, it is talking less of harassment rather than what is happening because they don't know about it. So my recommendation is that we need to do awareness campaigns and we need to state solidarity on that one, and it can give us maybe a good result on curbing sexual harassment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and also for speaking into the importance of social consciousness, because mostly the reason why we even have this problem is because of the manner and the way in which people are thinking. So now we're going to close the plenary session and give our honorable members of parliament time to address these particular issues, and I would kindly request that as you're answering, it would be concise so that we're able to finish our program and wrap up in time. Thank you very much. So over to you, our honorable members of parliament.
Thank you very much, Nadia. I wanted to say sexual harassment has been defined. What has not been defined are the forms. So if you want to go for a definition for sexual harassment, I was actually looking at it. It's sex-based behavior that is unwelcome and offensive to the recipient. But then it takes so many forms. This behavior now, it takes so many forms. So what we are trying to define is not necessarily what sexual harassment means. We all know what sexual harassment means. What we now need to codify or to put down is an exhaustive list of what constitutes sexual harassment. So that one, I think it's something that can actually be included in the bill or in the regulations. To say sexual harassment shall take the form of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But again, there is a danger in listing all and then leaving it closed. You should then say, and any other behavior, so that you also have a situation in which you might not have thought of, which would then be covered. Then there was a contributor who talked about Sodom. Sodom then falls off the realm of sexual harassment because it is a criminal offense, and it can be reported. But I was wondering, there was also a contributor who asked about why are you trying to be so specific to lecturers and students? What about landlords? I think it's food for thought. Because are you going to have a law for specific for higher and tertiary institutions relating to sexual harassment, then going to stretch on to incorporate the landlord at your house? So I think this is an area which we need to perhaps see as the bill goes through, that who is going to be covered by this bill. As the law stands right now, your lecturer falls perhaps under the Labour Act. You see, so this is why one contributor said that he was not suspended. If you go to the Labour Act, it says that if an offence has been committed, you can be suspended or you can continue with or without pay. So when the authorities do that, they are within their boundaries. So I think when we craft this bill, which I agree with the speaker who said we should amend all other pieces of legislation which have to do with the issue, the Labour Act, so that perhaps you remove the lecturer from the Labour Act, you put him under that particular bill, and then we have one comprehensive law to deal with the sexual violence. I think I'll leave the other aspects to my colleagues here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Honorable Mavunga, for actually touching on some of the issues. You know, when the students were speaking, I got to take my phone and actually get to the actual report, because I have an advantage of sitting on the Higher and Tertiary Education Committee. Because when I looked at this report that you guys have, it was extracted from the Hansard. And the Hansard is the verbal contribution by a member of parliament. So when I checked, I realized the report is only 4 pages. And yet our actual report was 12 pages. So actually we didn't do justice. And that's another issue, Honorable Mavuga and Honorable Mavetera, to say when a member is contributing in parliament, you also have time right? So what then happens is sometimes because of time, when you're given a certain, like minutes, I don't remember, according to the privileges committee, to say how many minutes are you supposed to then present. I don't remember that. But I think our honorable chair, you're supposed to have 20 minutes, yes, to present. So obviously 20 minutes, it's not enough to go through the 12 pages of a report. So the speaker will end up saying, please go to your recommendations, go to your observations, and so forth. So I was actually looking at this report and seeing that it's totally different from, or not really different, but meaning to say it is a whole page that was left out, actually a lot of pages that were left out, especially on recommendations, because all the issues that you've been raising here, they are here in the recommendations. So I would say, since now the report has been presented, we'll also talk to our clerk of the committee to say we need to share the actual report with different stakeholders, including Female Students Network, ZINASU, ZIKOSU, different universities and so forth, because this is why we then have to go on fact-finding missions, then we release a report, then the report has to be shared. So we need the actual report to be shared with you, because some of the issues that were raised, I think I took note of what Anna raised, to say, as we are waiting for the bill, what is actually happening. So on the recommendations, there are actually 12 recommendations from the committee, and the bill is actually the last recommendation. There was a recommendation to the Minister of Finance. I'm happy you raised an issue to say Honorable Mabetera is in the Budget Committee. What should be done? There's actually a whole recommendation, a paragraph on what the Minister of Finance has to do in terms of maybe trying to address issues to do with poverty in terms of students in institutions. There's also a whole recommendations on the issues that we've just touched on the issues of Labour Act. To say a lecturer, for example, is governed by a Labour Act. How then do you try to make sure that you address such issues? So I was just going through the 12 recommendations, and I think we have to share the actual report with you guys so that you can then see, so that when you even contribute to your, to Parliament, or when you write your submissions and so forth, you have the actual findings. Then of course, Ms. Preacher, you raised an issues to do with dressing and so forth. So when we do a report, we do it in verbatim. So when things are being raised, whether I am uncomfortable with it as a member of Parliament presiding over the fact-finding visit, even if I'm not comfortable, the clerk has to put it down. So if issues were raised, for example, things to do with dressing, about female students, like they will be improperly dressed and so forth, we have to take note of it, because it's somebody's contribution. Just like now, if there's someone minuting, they will minute each and everything that we've said, whether they like it or not. So that is also another aspect. So this is just a report, but it has nothing to do with the actual bill. So what we then need to do is then to say, okay, this is the report and this is the proposal of a bill. So a bill and a report, they're different. So a report comes after the visits that we have done. Then a bill is brought into the House by the minister, and now the actual bill we then have to debate to say, can we actually put this into law? Can we put this into act? Can we govern what someone is supposed to dress? Definitely no. Personally, I am not comfortable about that. But in terms of the report, you write everything that has been raised by the constituents that you've been, addressing. So there are actually a lot of recommendations here. I just thought, like, because of time, I can't go through them. But there are 12 recommendations. And the issue of a sexual harassment bill, it's only one recommendation. The rest, they're to do with issues of poverty, the issues of male counterparts also being, sexually harassed and so forth. So we'll also share with this. And also ZIMCHE has to should also incorporate modules of religion and professional ethics within the education curricula. So these are some of the things. And there's also a recommendation on engagements with civil society. It's actually here in the report to say, okay, we are the legislators, right? We are there to formulate the law. But there is also a whole role of the civic society. They need to also play a role. Say what? There is a policy, there is a law. Go to the institutions, try to popularize it. When we go for orientation, we have all gone through a university. The first week of orientation, we are busy, with other issues, but leaving the important aspect of addressing an important, aspect of sexual harassment. So I would want to hear, when in 2012 I joined a university, I was never addressed about sexual harassment during orientation. We do not want to see that. So we want you guys, because we see some of these organizations, including Say What, FSNs, the NASOs, because we see you during orientations. Why are these issues not being raised? So this is what we want to see, and it's actually part of the recommendations to say we want civil society to play that advocacy role. We want you to come to institutions during the orientation, talk about sexual harassment in the tertiary institutions. So it's a whole section on recommendations, and so I think the report here in Hansard ended on observations and not touching on recommendations and our conclusion as Parliament. So there are also deadlines. If you go there, like the Minister of Finance, your Committee on Budget, we actually gave them an ultimatum to say by the end of September 2022, we want to find something tangible. Is it a ministerial statement? What is it in terms of addressing issues of poverty, in terms of students in universities? We also spoke about, the Minister of Higher Tertiary Education to bring a bill, a proposal. We also gave timelines. So the recommendations, they're very clear. They have timelines. They're different proposals. So we'll also share this comprehensive report with all the organizations, because the answer did not do justice because of the time limit that we have in Parliament. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mombe and Honorable Mavunga. That was very detailed. I tried to jot down some of the issues that you raised, and I'll try to address some that have been left by my colleagues. The first one is, what do we need to do now? And for me, when I look at it, the first port of call is we have had sexual harassment issues coming through, but they've not been communicated as we expect. They are there out there, but no communication has been done, because indeed it's not criminal. So because of that, when it comes to you being accounted or even accounting to those, you won't be able to. It will seem like it's something which is just underground, something which does not exist, yet it exists. So in other words, we can say we've got an elephant in the room, but we don't see it. So this is where we are now, whereby we realize that this is an issue which is very pertinent, but nothing has been done. So for us as legislators, we sit on the Youth Caucus, myself and Honorable Mamombe. We discussed as we were here when we met outside, and we said, this is something, we've got a meeting on Wednesday. We'll take it upon ourselves as the Youth Caucus to discuss these issues. Because if you look at it, we've got a report that is there, which the portfolio committee did. But then when it comes to us even speaking in the House, Honorable Mamombe spoke about it, and we're happy about it. I was even talking to her outside. They said, Honorable Mamombe, look, it's now that this is coming out. It means there's a lot of time that we've taken to make things come into place. Yet we could have tried by all means to try to speed up things. So now what we need to do is we need to make noise. And the noise has to be now, especially from you, the students. And we can assist you as parliamentarians to make sure even in the House, we'll raise points of privileges. We'll make sure in the House, we'll be able to ask the minister, not only the Minister of Women Affairs. Sexual harassment, we need to understand that when it deals with the youth, it does not specifically just deal with the Minister of Women Affairs. That's why you see we've got a problem now. Whenever we talk of gender, we think of women. Gender, if everyone says gender, everyone would think that madzimai. But gender is not madzimai, it's men and women. That's why you see right now, you realize that there is nothing which is being said about the male people or the men. Because whenever we think about gender or sexual harassment, it's always the women. And even if you look at the one wanting to go and report cases, if you're a man and you're going to say a woman is sexually harassed me, unosekwa. Yet it's not supposed to be the case. You are being harassed because you are also equally a person. If you look at Section 17 of the Constitution, Section 56 of the Constitution, Section 8 of the Constitution, it speaks of gender equality. But if you look at it, when we read it, even as parliamentarians, we are saying it's gender equality and it's women. Yet that's not the issue. The issue is about a man and a woman. That's gender equality. So when we look at even laws to do with sodomy, of course it's criminal, yes. But when you talk of sexual harassment, a woman or a man is being sexually harassed by a fellow man. As much as it is criminal, we need to bring it into the sexual harassment bill, because it's also that you are being harassed. So at the end of the day, if you look at it, that is actually the other problem that we have. The other problem that we're having as a country, I know Honorable Mafunga can concur with me, he's a lawyer. We have got a problem whereby if we look at evidence, if we're going to speak of evidence in the court, the way we're using it is very, very traditional. It's not modern as it might seem to be. You realize that If one wants to come to court and you want to say someone need to send me a message and this is what they have to, the process you go through is very hectic. Even the money that you need for you to go and retrieve to say that this person sent me a message, it's actually a problem. So at the end of the day, for us to conclusively be able to account and say this person has committed this crime, we won't be able to. Some people will go scot-free, the issue that you're talking about. Not because those people are innocent, but because the evidence we need in our current courts is very, very traditional. Yeah. We need modern ways of doing it so that at least we can conclusively conclude the issues and we can protect every other person. Like what she said, she said, you realize that when a person goes and you need to give some recordings, I'm telling you, they can even tell you in court that that is not admissible in court. But that's the evidence you have. But they will not be able to admit it. So what it means is that we have a lot of people being sexually harassed, a lot of people being sexually abused, because the evidence that you have is not admissible in court. And then the other issue that I think we need to have, yes, we need to protect the young men because we're all equal, like I said, I mentioned that. Then the other issue is why generalize it? I think we need to be very specific on that, and we need laws that we've mentioned about it. Then the other issue is engagements are important. Training on sexual harassment. Yes, we need to train people on sexual harassment. It's very, very important because if ever we need to really deal with this issue as it comes, we need to be very real about issues and not seem as if we're acting. This is a very, very pertinent issue which we need to make noise about. So for me going forward, we need to make the noise. When you make the noise, you are heard. And it's not a matter of us saying, yes, the law will come, the sexual harassment bill has to come. The sexual harassment bill, when I look at it myself, I think we need to be able to generalize it. Let me tell you why we need to generalize it. One had to say, why do we need to be specific? Whenever you get a law that is there, it is not specific to say it has to be going to teachers, it has to be going to churches, it doesn't. A law has to be wholesome. And then when it becomes wholesome, then you can be specific as you go. But when it becomes wholesome, it means that it is now relating to everyone. When you talk of sexual harassment, we need to understand and appreciate that it's a matter of, I think the definition was given, and it relates to everyone, it's general. So the moment that it becomes general, we can then be specific. Because if we're specific, if we leave the other, what it means is that the person won't be adhered to. It means that there is no law which then safeguards that person who would have left. You would have left that person not because you want to leave that segment as it may be. But then what then ends up happening is you will leave it and then it doesn't become law. But if you generalize it, it means it applies to everyone. And everyone can take a leaf from it and say, this is where it relates, this is where it says, and also it now relates to me in churches, it now relates to me at schools, it now relates to me at any sector that it may be. I'm sure that contribution, I thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, our honorable members of parliament, for addressing all of our questions, and also to our young people, our students, for also having the bravery to come here on this platform and say my voice is going to be heard as I'm speaking on behalf of the rest of the students back at our resident institutions, back at home, back in our communities. And we think that this particular conversation is especially important because, as the report has highlighted, sexual harassment is very rife within our tertiary institutions. So we have a couple of questions, just two questions. It just require one-word answers. And the first question is, we've heard that there are going to be public hearings and that we can participate in these particular public hearings. But is there anything more that we can do to be able to be part of these particular presentations? For instance, in Parliament you will be debating. Is it allowed for some of the students here to come and sit in those particular meetings and hear these debates that are going to be happening?
Yes. Yes, so let me just quickly jump in. So when we are going for the public hearings, it's after the bill. After the bill has been presented, then we take it to, to the public, for their contributions. But also during parliamentary sittings, you can come in the gallery and making sure that you're following the debate. Or also, like Honorable Mavunga said, you have members of parliament probably that you relate with from your constituencies and so forth. Also inform them, tell them, research and make your contributions through them. And also in the committees, every meeting that has that includes people from outside. It's open for people to then come and sit and hear. You see, so for example, if you are sitting as a parliamentary portfolio committee on higher and tertiary education, and there is probably a minister coming in to present, or probably the PEMSEC or say what, or anyone that has been summoned, you're allowed to come in. So those, they usually just email people on the emailing list in Parliament. So you're allowed to come and follow through.
All
yes.
right. Thank you very much for emphasizing and giving us the clarity. So I'm sure we'll be meeting in the gallery, ladies and gentlemen, the students. All right, so thank you very much, our members of Parliament, for joining us today. And thank you, students.
One important issue, sorry, my apologies for taking it back. I think what you need to do going forward from here, you need to set up sexual harassment committees within your universities. Reason being, if you set it up, it means already you're having an affirmative action that you're putting in place, which is pro that. And it also creates the awareness that you need, whereby you can then be able to make sure that everyone knows that you're taking cognizance of what is happening. In that way, I'm sure we can then be able to fight sexual harassment. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Maybe also, the last thing, you're also welcome to petition Parliament. She's also a Madam Speaker. When Speaker is not there, the Deputy Speaker is not there, she's on the Speaker's panel. So you have a young person on the Speaker's panel, Honorable Mavetera. So you're allowed to bring in petitions as individuals or as organizations. I always try to tell this even in my constituents, to say, if you have any burning questions, bring a petition to Parliament. So that's also another effective way of maybe quickening issues to get into the, into bills and stuff like that. So bring in a petition as an individual or as an organization or as an institution. I don't know. You can bring petitions to say, we want these issues to be addressed. Then the petition comes to the relevant committee. Then from there, the minister is asked to come and comment and things like that. So petition is also one of the most important things that we can do as citizens to contribute to policy formulation in Parliament.
Okay, I absolutely love that. The best thing is that we have people that are in student leadership here, so they've heard about the sexual harassment committees, and we're expecting that. Now we're holding you guys accountable. We're expecting that from you guys. By the end of the month, guys, there's no time. So thank you very much, and for showing us so it's not just Parliament working by themselves, but it's all of us relating, engaging. We absolutely love that. So ladies and gentlemen, we are at the Say What studio of choice. It's young people, it's parliamentarians, and we're meeting together and discussing this very pertinent issue. But here at Say What, we have something exciting that we're doing. If you are between the ages of 10 to 24, we have the Chase competition that is looking for creators, people who are doing art. If you're into poetry, public speaking, we have a competition. So go on our Facebook pages, on our Instagram, on our YouTube, and try to find some information on the Chase competition. Amazing prizes to be won, and this is in every province. Make sure that you do join this particular competition. It might be the thing that will change your life. I've been your host. My name is Nadia Matisi. These have been the Parliamentary and Youth Roundtable. Look forward to more of these as we have our honorable members of Parliament coming to grace these particular events. And this is me signing out. Goodbye.